Now back to the show. This is AM 650's The Law Show.
Nice to have you with us this Sunday morning. We're talking about being a lawyer with two lawyers from McMillan LLP. Ryan Black and Andrew Aguilar are back with us on The Law Show. We've heard a little bit from both of them about their reasons for personally entering the profession. We've heard a little bit about McMillan, the firm that is now their employer.
Right.
And so a few questions, generally speaking, just in terms of being a lawyer. For one, just to both of you, what has surprised you the most since you've become a lawyer? What maybe has happened that you didn't expect, or has happened in spades that you did expect? What's been the biggest surprise so far, Ryan?
Well, for me, it's, I was, like I mentioned before, I was a bit of a geek and a nerd coming in, and I'm a bit of an introvert naturally. I actually tend to, I like to keep to myself and think myself, small group of friends type thing. And I actually thought, having watched TV, I thought that I wouldn't be a very good lawyer, because how can you not be this bombastic personality that can get up in front of crowds of people and yell, convictions at the top of your lungs?
Sure.
But what I found is that there's a room in law for pretty much every personality type, and just the diversity of the type of people. The media, particularly television dramas, presents a certain view of lawyers,
Right.
That is just a little bit too narrow. Lawyers are a very broad group of people. And it's amazing because, just having practice, I mentioned that I'm an introvert, but here I am on a radio show.
I was just going to say, for an introvert, you're doing a pretty good job of
I got
standing up.
The reality is that law gave me a chance to get comfortable.
Sure.
And once you're comfortable in the area you're in, and once you have some confidence, it's just amazing how much it opens up for you. So to me, the biggest surprise was that, it brought me out of my shell a little bit. And by just encouraging me to be who I was. I am who I am still. It's just that, as everyone else does, you grow over the course of your career.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you, Andrew? What's been your biggest surprise so far in your 6 years?
Well, I think, one of the things that was most surprising, perhaps initially when I came in there, is I also had an idea of what I thought a great lawyer would be. And it's, someone who can go up there and give this eloquent speech, and they're going to be very argumentative and hard-nosed and all of these types of things.
Right.
And the people who are most respected are the people who just seem very reasonable at all times and seem incredibly trustworthy at all times.
Ah.
And that was, and that wasn't necessarily the idea I had in my head, but it's these people who've built up reputations because people know that they can deal with them, and when they say something, they can believe that. And that's really, for many lawyers, does way more than having one argument on one day, because that's, as eloquent as you can be on one day, that may not sway someone. Whereas if, you've built up a reputation of being someone trustworthy who really can engage, you can engage and you can speak to and you can trust what they can say,
right,
then that's the kind of person who's really going to be able to convince a judge and convince the other side and be able to resolve a dispute.
Right. Now, just referring to Ryan's, we all watch too much American TV, and most of us really like those law shows.
Oh, yeah, they're exciting.
Well, they can wrap up a really complicated case in 60 minutes with commercials.
That's right.
So, I mean, our perspective on lawyers is distorted by the unreality of television, where the bombastic personality, again, to use your word, Ryan, the theatrical, eloquent, over-the-top presenter is the star.
Yeah.
And you're saying, Andrew, yes, of course, they're still very much they're all around in the legal profession, but the ones who enjoy the highest regard are not necessarily the most dramatic or theatrical. In fact, quite the opposite.
Yeah, you may not notice that person right away. You wouldn't be able to pick out and look at them and say, oh, that person must be, the absolute best litigator in the city. It's,
right.
It's someone who's very understandable. And when they're arguing often, it sounds like, they're sitting across from you and me, and they're just talking about it in a totally reasonable way.
Right. How could you not agree with them because they're being reasonable?
Right.
It's kind of funny because in those TV shows, frequently someone will say something really just earth-shattering, or will say something totally devastating to the person they're talking to. And it's very nice in a TV show they can cut away from that moment, but that's very awkward if you do it in an actual negotiation.
Right.
And it can really kill the whole, like on my side, it can kill a deal if you make someone look bad.
Sure.
So you wouldn't do that, if you're trying to, in my case, trying to come to the same terms on a deal. You're trying to arrive at some point of commonality. I think in a lot of ways disputes are the same. It's kind of counterproductive to be a bombastic, argumentative, difficult person to deal with.
Right, right.
Yeah, I have a friend who's, uses the phrase to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that really is a helpful way of thinking about it when people are doing it, because, it's an unusual situation. I think that was one of the things I had to come to grips with being a litigator myself, is that I'm constantly dealing with conflict every day. And that's something that's not, natural necessarily. And it's something people generally feel uncomfortable about. And clients have a lot of passions. So you have to be, as a professional, the person who can navigate those various passions and hopefully help those clients reach a resolution of their dispute.
Now, for a litigator, a person who goes to court more often than a person like Ryan, who's the solicitor who stays and does the deals with the clients. But when you're in court, that's the pinnacle of the adversarial nature of the law. The defense and the prosecution, party A versus party B, with some kind of arbitrator, mediator, judge in the middle of it all. So that's, again, where most of our perceptions of the law lie, Andrew, is that it's a fight to the death every day. You put on your robes and you go in there, and there's blood on the floor by the time the day is up. Is it that intense all the time?
Well, I think it's definitely not. That's definitely the tip of the iceberg, that you see people prepared there, and they're taking a very specific position. They may have had negotiations with the other side where they've acknowledged some of the strengths and weaknesses of their case that they may not do so as much if you're arguing it in front of a judge. And when you see that as well, there's just countless hours of preparation that goes into preparing and trying to take this complex set of facts and make it simple and make it really seem like your side is the only way that it can be. Right. But, getting there is going to take a long process. And when you see someone that's gone to court, it's because, parties weren't able to reach an agreement. There had to be some type of difference.
Right.
Usually, the law is unclear, and that's why people are arguing over it. If it's very clear, then, it's very difficult to stand up there, no matter how eloquent you are, and argue, and you're going up against a brick wall.
Right.
They're all very intelligent people who are in the room, and the judge is going to make a decision. So, but one of the key things as well is the system doesn't work unless both sides are able to articulate their arguments. The judge has to weigh both sides.
Sure.
And you'll hear the first person and you go, wow, like I absolutely understand their position. They have to win. And then you'll hear the other side and you'll go, oh no, I perhaps shouldn't have jumped to such a quick decision.
Sure.
I obviously was missing some of the facts. And that's what the court counts on. And, you almost, when you go in there to argue, you hope that the other side's going to go and give a reasonable argument, because if they don't, then the judge is going to have to take a little bit upon themselves to try to say, what's just. I need to understand what their position is. So that's how the adversarial system works.
Right.
And even though you might disagree with a particular position, I think becoming a lawyer, you realize quite quickly that the system requires you to really be an advocate for your client,
right,
and to take that position and to explain it fairly so that the system can work if you go into a trial.
The one area of the law that we haven't really included in this conversation so far is the one that's on TV the most, and that's criminal law.
Sure.
And that's where the real theatrics come in, and the last-minute revelation, and the witness who drops out of the sky and saves the day. Right. But that really is a different type of legal practice, isn't it? Because there are literally lives on the line. If somebody loses, somebody's going to the Crowbar Hotel for a good long stay. Yeah. It's really serious stuff.
Yeah, I have good friends who are on both sides of the criminal bar, prosecution and defense, and it's a totally different game. They obviously have a completely different job than I do.
Yeah.
The stakes. I I work on deals where there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake.
I believe
that. That's not inconsequential. But I think most of them would rather lose $100 million than go into jail or for the rest of their lives or something like that. So
Sure.
The stakes are quite high in criminal law, and it's something that if that's something that a person is interested in doing, it's kind of one of the things you have to decide on early on in your career. I think it would be difficult to jump into that because the bar is very different than what we do.
Andrew, Ryan has said there's his biggest discovery since entering the profession is that there's room in it for every personality type imaginable. When we talk about criminal law, you're the litigator here, and so that's where most of criminal law, I imagine, happens in court. What sort of personality type is typically attracted to criminal law?
Well, I think there's different types on both sides. There's the Crown prosecutor who's on for the government, and there's the other side who's on for the defendants. And I think the interesting thing is I think both sides are very much, you have to have a real focus on justice and a real belief in the system to be able to do that. A criminal defense lawyer has to really believe, that they have to defend their client and give them, absolutely, even if, and they deal with some very difficult situations.
I would think so.
But, what's at stake is liberty, and what's at stake is liberty for everyone in society.
Right.
If the rules and if the laws can convict someone who didn't do it and who shouldn't have those problems, then that can happen to you or me. And I think people who really have that strong belief and are able to really focus on the system and the idea that we need to have a fair and just system that protects the equities of all the different people is someone who's going to argue on the criminal law and might have a bent towards the defense side. Someone who also really believes in society might want to be a prosecutor because they believe that, they need to go out there and protect society.
Send these bad guys away.
It is, it's something where people's moral beliefs, I think, can really play into it a lot more. Whereas, if you're on the business side, there's a whole range of disputes and things aren't usually as black and white as you might find
Right.
in a criminal context.
In terms of being able to affect public policy change, we've talked about the law in terms of the fact that it is an evolving thing. It's constantly being updated. There's constantly new things being brought to the law, and so it's always evolving. It's always creating. There's always new law being written every day, and some of that law, some of that case law, becomes public policy, and so lawyers, in their own small way, without being elected, and most elected officials in legislatures in Canada are lawyers, interestingly, but lawyers who aren't politicians, but who practice daily, can help to change the world through cases that affect public policy. It's a more tedious process. Andrew, you've already spoken about how long some of these things can go on, but it can have quite a positive ending.
Absolutely. And there's different lawyers. And, it is an area where if you're really passionate about social justice or one of those areas, that you can make a difference and take on certain cases to push things forward. I think of certain lawyers like Joseph Arvey or Barbara Finley who have, a very strong belief in what they think society should be like,
right,
and what they believe equity is about. And, they have been able to go and take on certain clients, take on certain positions, and have been able to effectively change the laws by arguing, all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada in some cases on what is fair and what is just in those societies. It takes a long route, and that's not for every lawyer. There's lawyers who have different beliefs. There's some who, believe in, what the current system is and, and want to help protect some of those elements. There's people who want to see change and are able to really work on that. And
right,
there's
sure.
people who are just really focused on, individuals and clients and trying to, get the best for the people that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
I wonder when you talk with both of you, when you talk with clients, and you've got a dispute. You're the guy that does the deals, Ryan, but one of the deals goes south on you.
Yeah.
And suddenly everybody's mad at each other. And, Andrew's going to get called in because somebody's going to get court, and somebody's going to get, raked over the coals, one would expect.
Right.
When court comes into play, are you ethically bound to tell your clients something to the effect that, yes, of course I'm going to represent you to the very best of my ability, and I certainly hope we're going to win, but because we're going to court, there is a risk we could lose. That happens in court. Somebody wins and somebody loses every day. Sure. It's a very high-risk approach, isn't it, Andrew?
I think it's always a risk when you go into a courtroom. I tell my clients that no matter how good your case is, if I were 100% confident, I'd still tell you, your best odds are 80% or something like that, because there's always, if you're letting another person make a decision, it's taking it out of your hands. And I think that's something that lawyers really do have to be very clear with on their clients. And as much as lawyers are advocates for their clients as well, they have to be a person who, really helps manage their clients as well, who perhaps aren't as used to the legal system, or in many cases help manage their clients and help them, reach a reasonable resolution. When you talk about a mediation, often you talk about going to a mediation to mediate a dispute, and the best mediation is if both parties leave unhappy, but the dispute is settled.
Exactly. Right. So if everybody's unhappy, but signatures are on all the documents, it's been a good day.
They usually say that the worst negotiated settlement is usually better than the best litigation, because when two parties come together to reach a deal on something, there's a certain finality to it that the loser never really gets in a court case. The winner might get it, but the loser never really gets it. At least in a settlement, both sides get a certain finality to it.
And there is a movement, a shift in emphasis in the legal profession and even on the bench with respect to mediation and arbitration and other methods of resolving disputes short of going to court and taking the ultimate risk. And I think I agree with you there, Ryan. I think the mediation approach, if it's workable and if it's agreed to, can really be reduce the risk. If nothing else, it'll reduce the risk.
Well, I mean, coming from the solicitor side of things, working on business deals that are often very contentious. If you're trying to sell a business to someone and they want to pay half what you want to sell it for, there's a big dispute in the middle of the room.
Right.
And quite often it's about a lot of things. Or maybe someone's already agreed to buy it and they want to back out of the deal. And so there's, I've had to deal in a short time with disputes that maybe don't end up on Andrew's plate because they don't get to court, because both parties decide, rather than do all that, let's see if we can figure out a solution that we're both at least willing to live with, as opposed to an all or nothing, win or lose in court. Which, I mean, I guess courts aren't always win or lose, but it certainly can feel that's the risk, is that it's win or lose.
Right. Need to take a break, but just before we do, McMillan, talk to us about the team concept and how that works inside a firm, especially a large one like yours.
Right.
Andrew's the litigator.
Right.
You're the deal maker.
Right.
One of your deals goes sideways.
Yeah.
Do you pass the file on to Andrew? Do you team up? How does that work? The collaboration behind the scenes, how does that go?
I think the best part about working at a firm like McMillan is just having like 80 experts in our office that are good at different things. I would be not very useful if I went to court to advocate for someone, and Andrew is incredibly useful at going to court and advocating for someone. So I don't certainly hold on to the file, in order to whatever benefit I get out of it. I let Andrew run with it.
And do you get to pick? Do you get to pick the person that would most effectively represent the client in this particular case?
I'm pretty fortunate that I feel like I could pick a lot of people at our firm that would be the right person.
Well, that's what I mean. So you have bench strength in that regard.
We have good bench strength, and we also have very good management teams that decide sometimes this would be the right person for it. Like I might not know who the right person is. I have a new interesting issue I've never dealt with before. I don't know if Andrew's the right person.
Right.
Someone there does though. Yeah.
And so are people constantly coming into your office bouncing things?
Oh yeah.
You want to take this one on, Andrew?
Yeah, and I think that's a helpful thing too, is having a firm where we have solicitors who are doing deals and litigators, is we can also get brought in fairly early on. Things look like they might go sideways, and they can ask me a couple questions over the course of a few weeks, and then if they can't resolve it, then it might end up on my desk. But I can be there to give them some guidance as they're sending letters.
Yeah, because you've had a court case once that looked very similar to this, and if you just try this, maybe it'll all go away.
Yeah.
And if Ryan hadn't been, you wouldn't know about that court case. So there's the teamwork, right?
And and we've all been, I think, most litigators have been in trial where they said, if only they hadn't done this.
Right.
If I can't believe, oh no, there was this one fact that was really bad for our client, and if you get involved earlier on in the process, you might be able to help avoid some of those facts.
Eliminate a few of the if only.
That's right.
This is The Law Show here on AM 650. Our guests are Andrew Aguilar and Ryan Black from McMillan LLP, and you can find out a lot more about that firm online at mcmillan.ca. We're back after this quick timeout.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is AM 650's The Law Show.